Oh, the Golden Stallion's here for you, baby. Woo! Because, oh, man. Well, I'll tell you how I'm here. I'm actually wearing my my Klingon bathrobe. And, oh, yes, it is Klingon. Jeutbej Takir. I mean, it is the real fucking deal. Even got some Klingon writing in gold along the arm here. It's got a little bit of gray to it, but that's all right. Still largely triple black, as always. Oh, man, just got out of the shower. Because, you know, things are taking place. So it's your usual Wednesday Q&A that, of course, all Patreon subscribers get access to every single week that I do. And I base it upon the questions you send me through the channels available. Of course, you can use Patreon's own messenger. You could use Twitter even. Sometimes I get questions from that, or you could even get in touch with me, via email, and send me your questions. And I've got some doozies this week. Actually, one of them is, might get hot in here. But anyway, and a fun one. So not a whole lot of tech here, but, there's some tech. So let's get into that. First thing I want to talk about is, I'm just going to break into the questions. I'm not going to get into tell us a sovereign tech secret this week at all. Cause I want to blaze through this. I've got, have I got places to go. But anyway, so first question is, for all of the faults you think that Facebook has, do you at least think that Mark Zuckerberg is an innovator? And what do you think that he has actually innovated on? So this is an interesting question to bring up, particularly since Facebook really introduced something this week that I find to be, it's an interesting play for a couple of reasons, and I'll break into what those are. But first off, do I consider Zuckerberg an innovator? Depends on your definition of innovator, but in some ways, yes, I think he is. In some ways, sure, he's innovated. But anyway, I'm not going to give this guy any real praise because I think any of his innovation has either been largely funded or has largely been pushed by various alphabet soup organizations. Again, we're dealing with corporatism here. Facebook is, in a very real sense, an arm of the state. As far as what Mark Zuckerberg has actually innovated with, it's not necessarily his innovations. I mean, some people would want to list off real fast. I'm sure they would want to list off a bunch of different APIs that Facebook has brought to market and that have even open sourced. Well, the problem there is that a lot of those APIs were things that they acquired, that they bought out. There's very little that Facebook itself actually invented. Very little. Even, you could say, well, aren't they, getting internet, to the other 6 billion and all this shit, and it's like, well, yeah, but they bought out companies like Titan and all those other companies to be able to do that. So this is the thing, is that really most of these companies don't innovate at all. I think when Magic Leap, of course, I don't think Magic Leap's ever going to come out, but the way that people talk about Magic Leap, with Google, Magic Leap is this AR, VR company, that supposedly works without, it uses zero UI to some degree. I mean, it's all very, very ethereal and not very, no one's really been able to actually see this in action, which is why I debate whether or not it's actually going to be a thing. Or, with Magic Leap, what it really could end up being is a combination of Project Tango and Daydream VR, both not exactly Google projects. Well, Daydream VR, I guess to some degree would be, but I think Magic Leap, the reason it's been so secretive is because they're field testing all of the various technologies required to make Magic Leap work already. But that's the thing, is that really Magic Leap in and of itself, it's not its own innovation. I mean, you can say when you combine all this different stuff together, and they bought out Magic Leap as well, when you combine all this stuff, that you end up with an innovation. Yeah, there's some truth to that, but let's be very, very clear here that these companies are doing very little in-house. They're generally just buying out other people, which is largely true for Facebook. You could say that Facebook has innovated in that somehow it got, 1 billion people to care about being on the internet a lot. I don't know how you quantify that as an innovation. I mean, a lot of their ideas that they've put out there have largely failed. The Facebook phone, a lot of these different things, are abject failures. A lot of their apps are abject failures. Like, what was that one, Slingshot, that was trying to compete with Snapchat, and instead they just kind of baked it all into Instagram and all this. I mean, it's really, I challenge people to come up with a genuine, like, game-changing thing. Kind of like, now, a genuine innovation would in many ways be the Amazon Echo. Okay, to where, like, it leapfrogged an entire, hardware category, and talk about zero UI. I mean, they did it, and I'm not, praising Bezos or anything. I'm just saying that is actual innovation. I don't even think the iPhone was that much of an innovation. In fact, the iPhone's kind of a fluke. I know a lot of people get, all hot and bothered about the fact that everybody's got a GPS device now. Isn't this magical? What a wonderful future we live in, blah, blah, blah. Using a smartphone for maps was a mistake. Like, they even say that the only reason there was maps were highlighted on the iPhone when it was first introduced, what was that, in 07? Was because Steve Jobs needed something. He didn't care what it was. He needed something to show off the touch features, right? Okay, so maps on a device, I mean, it was an afterthought. It was the actual people, Apple didn't come up with it. People found the real world use for it, and then developers acted in kind. But that's the thing, is that this idea that the market, brought on, I mean, you could say, well, the customers or the consumers are the market actors in this case, and the market forces in these cases. Yeah, I get that. But let's just be clear that Apple didn't innovate. Okay. The people did, because again, Steve Jobs wasn't asking for maps. He just said, okay, I just need something that would look good on that. And when he was pinching and zooming the map, people were like, ooh, wow. But again, that wasn't Apple's intention for that to be the centerpiece, or for that to even fucking matter. It was just to show, the entire purpose of maps on a smartphone was to show off touch controls. It was not to be maps on a smartphone. Got it? So it's very tough to, to really, like, talk about what is actually an innovation of sorts, when you get into these things. I mean, an innovation that I think a lot of people in the United States don't realize that Facebook has kind of brought to fore, where it's brought a confluence of technologies, would probably be, the fact that Facebook has implemented signal encryption in most of its apps, has implemented Tor, has implemented, the use of PGP keys. Like, I mean, they've really done, and I hate it because it's all for, in my opinion, nefarious purposes, either to get people hooked onto the Facebook platform, or it's, just a honeypot of metadata for people, to think they can trust. But Facebook, and I've said this before on main episodes of Sovereign Tech, that Facebook has really, like, they are doing everything right as far as how they make their services and platforms available. They're doing everything right. Like, even, here's one area where they might have kind of innovated, is with their implementation of OAuth. Granted, they didn't invent OAuth, but, the ID system that they came up with, to where it's very specific in what data it shares, with whatever other services you use your Facebook ID, to log in with. Okay, like if you go to another website like gift.com or something and you use Facebook to log in with, the way that your Facebook ID and Gift interact is kind of the right way of going about that. If you're going to do secure identity of some kind, not that I want identity, whatsoever, but you get my point. I mean, and even, the way that you can secure your Facebook account, if you have your app on your smartphone, and this is the only way you can do it, and use the code generator feature on your smartphone app, that is a super secure login system you've got there. That's a super secure password system. In fact, other than the fact that it's Facebook owning it, and that ultimately has the keys, you have, like, the best ID system on the planet right there. In the conventional sense. I'm not saying what I want. I'm saying in matters of, like, pure security, not security from, the NSA or whatever, because, Facebook will just, suck their dick whenever they need it. So, I mean, like, literally, like, they'll get on their knees, they'll even, swallow the gravy, cradle the balls, the whole thing. If the NSA needs something, oh, absolutely, sir, yeah. I mean, that's how it would be. But as far as, like, protecting you from anything else, yeah, Facebook's pretty on, I mean, it's on the up and up with a lot of that. So in a lot of ways, they've really innovated in bringing a lot of security and privacy technologies of all ironies to the masses to make use of. And they've done it in a very simplistic checkbox kind of way. But other than that, I mean, really, like, what is exciting that Facebook has done? Instagram? I agree. Instagram's very exciting. Facebook didn't do that. That was a 13-person team. Didn't require a gigantic company to come up with, in the abstract, what I think is one of the best social media platforms out there. In the abstract, like, that idea, I think, is great. So anyway, that's the best I can say as far as like how, what Facebook has done. I mean, in those ways they've innovated. Now, I'm not going to say Mark Zuckerberg's an idiot. Actually, he kind of proved, we talked about this on Sovereign Tech maybe a couple months ago, where there was that great picture of him where Instagram was celebrating, what was it, 1 billion users or some or 1 billion down, I don't know, whatever, it was some crazy number or something. And in the picture, you got to look at Mark Zuckerberg's laptop. And on that laptop, he had all of his ports covered, like with tape, with probably what they call tamper-proof tape, to where if somebody peeled it off. And then he had his webcam covered, and he was using Thunderbird, which probably means he was using PGP. He was doing all the right moves. He knew how to secure a computer. So obviously he's not a moron on how all this stuff is supposed to work. And it's not even like, you can say, well, Facebook itself is an innovation. Not exactly. I mean, you had Friendster, like, a lot of people had the same idea. It wasn't even that new of an idea. Like, if his innovation was start with college kids, make it the hot thing on college. And since conventionally, I'm not saying what I want, I'm saying conventionally, everybody on planet Earth wants to fuck hot college girls or something, that, make everybody want to be on board with it, because that's what all the college kids are using, right? Because, that's what people seem to seek, is how can I have this eternal youth by latching onto these things that everybody thinks is cool, when maybe they're not. I don't think college is cool. So, I get, again, that's the best answer that I can really, really give you. I mean, it's tough. The word innovation, and granted, this question was from a tweet, so, I can't expect people to expound upon what do you mean by innovation? Yeah, I don't see it. And, if you think that there are ways that Facebook has innovated, by all means, okay, you can use Patreon, you can use that platform to get in touch with me, leave comments at the bottom of this episode, and I will recant if I find out that I'm wrong. And I'm open to have been wrong. Again, I know a lot of people will mention some of the APIs that they've done, but I guarantee you're going to find that those APIs were all bought. Like, that Facebook themselves did not make it. Now, what I wanted to talk about is not an area of innovation, because they're copying Craigslist and they more or less know it. Facebook is copying across the board with Snapchat. They copied the stories onto Instagram, or, the memories feature. They turned it into stories on Instagram, right? So what they came out with is they came out with Marketplace. That's what it's called. Okay. Now, as far as I know, this only works in the app, and it is literally a Craigslist competitor. And, it's like locally you can deal with people, you can buy and sell things. They are not a payment processor. They do not do payment processing, which is interesting because Facebook has PayPal integrated into it, or at least in the Messenger, it has PayPal integrated into it. So why they couldn't further that deal a little more, I don't know. But it doesn't facilitate payment. It just facilitates, kind of being, again, it's just like Craigslist. Okay. Now, there's a couple interesting points about this. The first one, okay, because this isn't an innovation either, but the first one is that this goes to show that Facebook knows to stay relevant, it has to localize heavily, because people cannot handle, we talk about this on Sovereign Tech all the time, the Dunbar number. People can't handle 5,000 people in their life. They can't handle dealing with the whole world. So, they're trying to relocalize. They've been talking about doing this for years, where they're going to, why, you have, say, like, you have a ton of friends, say you have 5,000 friends. I don't know. I sure as hell don't. Okay. But say you had 5,000 friends on Facebook or whatever. I mean, I have, like 7,000 on Twitter, but on Facebook, whatever. Say you have all those friends. I mean, do you see all of those people interacting? No, by the algorithms, you can't. But even then, I bet a lot of them, you don't see them really posting anything public anymore. This is what they were talking about earlier in the year, where Facebook themselves were concerned because they're experiencing content collapse because nobody's posting out in the open on the news feed. But where are these people? Did they leave Facebook? No, they're either dealing in Messenger or they're dealing in groups. And groups is, why are groups so popular? Because it's a smaller subset of people in a multitude of ways to where, okay, I can handle dealing with this many people. Okay. And Marketplace is kind of in the same vein to where it's, okay, Facebook knows that people really like this whole talking to everybody thing is kind of dying away. Like, if it has to be a two-way street, if it's a one-way street, you can talk to billions of people. It doesn't matter because it's just one way. You're not really talking to them. You're just talking at them. Okay. Like radio. Why hasn't radio ever died? Because it is a mass media, as in it reaches a mass of people that, you can take calls, but you can, it's not like the radio host has to deal with millions of people. I mean, millions of people can listen to him, but he doesn't have to deal with the millions of people. So you get my point. Anyway, so Marketplace is interesting because I think it proves what I've been saying for years on Sovereign Tech, that networks and technology in general is going to get on the trend sooner or later. As long as people are interested in being free anyway, on relocalizing, not on this gigantic, massive network, where you have the potential to deal with people. You just have no idea who the hell they are. I mean, myself, sometimes and I don't know how this works. I don't know how the algorithm works for this, but sometimes when I share, I have a public account, no shit. Okay. But when I share, say some kind of link from, I don't know, whatever website, TechCrunch, IO9, I don't know. Sometimes I'll get a ton of people flood in that they're not followers. They don't even know who the hell I am, but they're just commenting on it. Like, and I've talked about this before on Sovereign Tech. Like, I don't understand how it happens. It's like they think that they're commenting on the TechCrunch story when really they're commenting on my timeline. Okay. And I don't know about you, but I get pissed off when these people start saying like really mean shit. It's like, do you even know who the fuck I am? Like, who the hell would just come in and start saying crap like this? And I mean, and a lot of times, when I post things on whatever social media service it's on, I often post it with the idea that there's going to be some understanding of things that I've said in the past because I've said them over and over again. And so I assume people following on social media, a lot of times are also listeners of Sovereign Tech. That's not always true. I have great friends that don't listen to Sovereign Tech, and that's fine. I don't expect anybody to listen to it. But I'm just saying that, like, a lot of things I post on there, especially tech stories, generally I post it to interact with the audience that I have. I'm dealing with anywhere between 6,000, to 11, 13,000 people a week, on Sovereign Tech. Okay, so it's usually to reach out to all of that. And so I assume, when I do that, like my intention is not to speak to everybody on planet fucking Earth. It's to speak to, listeners of the show. And so I do a lot of shorthand or I don't mention certain aspects, but then these people come in and they start saying all this crap. And like, obviously they don't know I'm an anarchist. I mean, it's just insane. So anyway, relocalizing is going to be a thing. It's already long happening. There have been ideas like Path and some others that have kind of come and gone and people aren't that excited about it. Not in the US maybe, but in other parts of the world, people get it. That they can't deal with however, all these different people. So anyway, the other interesting thing about Marketplace, and hold on just a second. I need to disrobe. It's getting hot in here. The other thing is that now, I mentioned earlier about one of the areas where Facebook has kind of genuinely innovated, or, well, not genuinely, but it has kind of innovated depending on your definition of that term. They have, they're really good about baking in a lot of security and privacy features. One of the things that the Android app can do, and that you can access the web page with, but I don't think you can get to Marketplace with just the web page on a desktop. I think you have to do it through the app. So let's say use case. Here we go. You are someone, or not you, but somebody is accessing the Facebook app, okay, on their Android device. They have Orbot installed. They have the Tor checkbox turned on the Facebook app for Android. They go to Marketplace. Okay, now, first off, it's a question of whether or not Marketplace would even work in this instance, but I haven't had the chance to really try that out. But I would imagine to some degree they would still want this to work because the reason they implemented Tor is to get people past government restrictions, and all this and firewalls and all that, in other countries. Okay. So it's not really to keep them from, it's not necessarily to hide them. And also I think it's to create a false sense of security, and trust in Facebook, but whatever. So you're on tour, you're on your Facebook app, and you're in the US, you're in a state, let's say, that has not legalized marijuana or something like that, or whatever. It's some kind of drug. You want to go sell some heroin. Okay. So this person, uses whatever code words are required, on a Craigslist post, or on Twitter. People, they use various code language to have a drug deal go down. Okay, whatever. I don't care. I'm an anarchist. Do your thing. So you're doing this through Marketplace, through Facebook's version of Craigslist Marketplace, and you have Tor turned on. Okay. And you go and you enact the deal. All right. Now the question becomes, and maybe because there isn't the payment processor, maybe that's where this isn't such a big deal, but I don't know. But here's my question. Okay. Is that when you start using Marketplace with Tor enabled on an Android device, does that become a dark market? And, and if the sale of some kind of contraband happens, does that mean that Mark Zuckerberg is responsible for dealing drugs? Does that mean that Mark Zuckerberg, by government standards, should he be going to jail like Ross Ulbricht did? That's in my opinion, that's the $1 billion question. Is that, the instant something fishy goes down on Marketplace, who's responsible? In the case of the Silk Road, Ross Ulbricht was responsible, regardless of the details around the situation. So, can Mark Zuckerberg go to fucking jail? I mean, they're not going to lock him up for, behavioral experimentation on human beings, which I would think that that'd be enough in the conventional world. Okay, I'm not one for the prison system. Don't misunderstand me. I wonder. So anyway, that's the other interesting aspect of Marketplace that I think a lot of people are kind of missing, is that if it can be accessed through Tor, through the app, ooh, somebody's in trouble. Anyway, let's move on. I got another quick question here. And this actually also came through Twitter, but it was, what is your current favorite torrent site for movies? So for movies in general, extratorrent.cc, I put a link in the show notes for this Q&A episode, which this would be subscriber episode 21, Q&A episode number 12. But yeah, extratorrent.cc is probably the best one for movies. And I'm kind of guessing, not to say that I understand this or that I am doing the same thing myself, but I'm kind of guessing maybe people are looking for copies of Snowden. And folks, you're just not going to find them. At least I haven't. I found them in Russian, but not in English. And it's kind of funny. Like, I even tweeted this out. I was like, just on principle, really, that movie should be leaked online in high quality, not just as a cam job or anything. But I'm in jest there. So anyway, but extratorrent.cc, as far as I've seen, is the best for movies. Demonoid.pw, that's still a good multi-purpose one. My favorite torrent site overall right now is still the one that I shared with Patreon listeners and the larger Sovereign Tech audience now. But it was worldwidetorrents.eu. That's really great if you're into comic books and books in general. Otherwise, it's not top notch. They do have a lot of good porn on there if you're up for that, but that's personal preference. So anyway, extratorrent.cc is where I top things off at that. And, speaking of porn, so here's kind of when I said earlier, things are going to get hot in here. I had somebody message me, and I'll try and boil this down because there's a lot of specific details that we don't exactly need to cover, but understand that I am going to get into, very extreme content here. Okay. Because this question is about threesomes, and it was effectively asking, I will at least give you the, I'll mention that the pronoun, it is a male that is asking the question, so I can tell you that much. But it was effectively asking, how do you start one? What's kind of the etiquette and protocol and all of that, in engaging in one, which I like that they use etiquette and protocol, kind of a little play to C-3PO right there. But yeah, no binary load lifters here, folks. So anyway, I'll get into this, kind of just I'll break into it. That way we don't have to spend so much time reading the whole question. Ah, boy. So here's some things. Now, yes. And the person asked because I have been in threesomes, orgies, been in a foursome. Like I have a degree of experience in this, in this matter. There's a lot of people out there that claim to have a whole lot more, including in circles that I run in. I think they're full of shit. I can tell just by looking at them, but whatever. So anyway, so how do you even engage in one? Now I'm going to be a little broader than the question was asking about, but I'll get into it here. So it depends. All right. If it's a threesome in particular, and there wasn't any asking about a foursome. Maybe I'll speak on that briefly, but with the threesome in particular, okay, there's a couple ways that this can go. Now, again, this is coming from a guy. This person is not gay. And, if they were, that's fine. But so just based upon the heterosexual nature of the question. So we've got, there's the potential of, it can be one guy, two women, or two guys, one woman. And there are just worlds of difference in those dynamics. You might think that there isn't, there is. Okay. I've engaged in both, one more than the other. All right. But I'll put it to you this way. So just very, very quickly and simply, if it is, before I get into, how perhaps like, how do you broach the subject and things like this? If it is two girls or, two women, one guy, okay, it's not a problem. It's really not a problem. Everybody can still have fun. Okay. But there's probably going to be spans of time for however long you're stooping. Okay. In this threesome, there are going to be spans of time to where one member, potentially the woman isn't going to like have anything necessarily direct to do. Okay. Direct meaning like that, I mean, there's ways around it. Like, yeah, a guy could have one gal doggy style and then, maybe could be, finger fucking the other one. Right. I mean, there's ways to go about that, but it's just like, there's just this kind of thing that happens to where one of the women generally will either like kind of sit off a little bit to the side on her own, or maybe, she'll just have, I mean, you people have watched porn, some of how all this goes. But I mean, it won't be like there won't be as much concentration on one of the women as to where if the threesome is two guys, one woman, it is a very, very tight knit experience. No pun intended. Like, I mean, everybody's getting pleasure somehow, somewhere. Like this, that's how it's happening. If it's because it's a spit roast or what, or, two guys on each side of the woman. I mean, however it's happening, there's a lot more direct contact and, everybody's, I mean, I'm not recommending one over the other either, like by any means. In fact, I mean, my personal favorite is not, okay. So the two guys, when here's the problem. All right. Is that one could say that two guys, one woman would somehow be like, because of the amount of intimacy and interaction, like the visceralness, the potential visceralness of the interaction. I don't mean being, hard and fast or anything. I just mean as in like, everything that's being touched and used and, whatever else. Okay. It just allows for a far more visceral, encounter. Okay. I don't mean that. I don't mean visceral in any like, bad way. I just mean it as in like, closer contact and, more in touch and all that, more connected. So when it's the hard part is, here's the really hard part, is finding another guy, okay, that can handle it. Like finding another guy that's mature enough to honestly, I mean this, to not fall in love or get possessive, say, over the woman. Now, if you're polyamorous and, a woman has two boyfriends, I mean, then that's her call. That's fine. But like, if it's something where, you're just trying it out, Okay. Like for the first time, or, you're just inviting a friend over, or, things end up, happening, whatever, things start taking place. Woo. It's very tough to find a guy that doesn't like take it too far. Like he can confuse one night's pleasure with somehow the woman must have him from now on into eternity. And that, folks, most of the time, it's just not how it works, especially with dudes. With women, it can be a very different situation, but, with two women, but with one guy, two women, whatever, you get my point. So it's very, very difficult to, and I don't mean to, I know I have a lot of male listeners. I mean, fortunately, my audience is pretty well split. Okay. I'm just saying that it's very tough for both guys to really be mature enough, to handle the situation and not be detached, because you don't want to be detached, but just to understand what the morning after's like. Yeah, sure. Maybe everybody will cook each other breakfast. Okay. But that might be the end of it. Deal with it. And it's funny because I think a lot of people, a lot of guys, I think they have this idea in their head that the guy can just, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, and leave. No, I find it to be quite the opposite, that oftentimes if it's two women, if it's the other way around where it's, one guy, two women, that, usually the women can be like, wham, bam, thank you, man. Or if it's a lesbian situation, it can be wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. And, the women can walk away from it. But as to where, it's different if it's a woman. Oh man. Anyway, this all gets very confusing. So I'm trying to boil it down quickly here, so we can get to the next question. But, bottom line is that it's very tough to find that other guy, as to where, in my experience, it's very easy to find that other woman if you're already in a heterosexual couple. Like just eons, easier. And I don't use the word easy as any kind of pejorative. Okay. I'm just saying by comparison. All right. And and the morning after and all that is usually far more laid back. Okay. And generally, hopefully the guy you're with has that maturity level that I just talked about, to where he recognizes that, hey, that might've just been a one-off. Like maybe maybe that woman, she might normally be a lesbian or something. She just needed some dick that night. Like it's not love, and he doesn't own her, now that he's had two women in his, in his clutches and blah, blah, blah. Hopefully the guy is at that level of maturity. So, because, you get three women together, generally, like, they can sort of walk away. But you throw a guy in the mix and possessiveness becomes a really, really big deal. That's not to say that, a woman and a man like that there's some women that, any guy they kind of get with, they start getting attachments and feelings for. So it can happen that way too. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily bad. I'm just saying that by and large, like the ability to handle the situation later, is, it can be very strange, because at the same time, like you don't want a guy, you don't want another guy in the mix that's just like, very aloof, and then, treats the woman like a booty call in the future or something, but, just doesn't care the next day and doesn't talk at all, or, whatever. You don't necessarily want that, but you don't want any kind of possessiveness and things like this. And really, I think, expecting a booty call every few months from the same person is to some degree, kind of a form of possessiveness. So anyway, back to the threesomes. So, my personal favorite, just because generally there's not so much emotion, undue emotion, I should say, or drama that you have to deal with later. My favorite historically, I'm not saying I do this stuff now, I'm just saying historically, was, two gals, one guy. Okay. Now, I'm just as happy if it's only, two women doing their thing and I happen to be sitting at a computer. I've been in hotel rooms where, like, literally I would be, cracking open my Windows CE laptop. Okay. And my girlfriend and a friend of hers who didn't really like me, would just be on the bed, doing their thing. And you got to have that maturity to let them just do their thing. And then you do your thing. And don't start jerking it, whatever, and watching them and all that shit. Let them have their fun. Okay. So, but it's so tough to find people with that level. And I hate to say it because it's all up to choice. It's not necessarily lack of maturity. Sometimes it's up to just a person's, personal preferences when it comes to relationships or something. And that's fine. Okay. And there's lots of ways, when you're in a threesome, you want to, like I said, there is the problem when it's one guy, two women. There is, it's tough to, you can lose that intimacy potentially when it's that way. It's the nature of the game. And I think, at least myself, when I was in those situations, I put it upon myself to, try and keep that intimacy at as high a level as possible. I'm not saying that sex is just PIV, because it's not. Okay. But, try to be as inclusive as possible, and that means you have to think, and this is hard for some people, I think, especially maybe at first. Okay. It was hard for me at first. You have to think about you really have to think about more than just your pleasure. Okay. Now, a lot of people can handle, okay, I'm going to think about what this person needs, but it does change things when you're trying to think about pleasing multiple people. I mean, it really fucking changes things. Okay. So, I mean, I could talk about positions and all the different stuff, you want to do, like if you want to do a double finger, where both gals are, say on a couch or something, and, you're using both hands, blah, blah, blah. I mean, there's lots of ways to go about that. Lots of fun to be had, but you really, I personally myself, and it's not just because I'm a guy, it's just just because I'm a member in this, say I would be a member in this triad thing. I want to be super conscious of, is everybody involved? Does everybody, and you kind of get that sense, kind of just that feeling, is everybody really into this and all that? And if somebody at any point isn't into it, let them go if they want to. Of course. I mean, consent is just, such a huge deal. So anyway, with that, all that said, okay, I don't need to get any more of the graphic details as far as like positions to go. I mean, you'll feel it out what you want to do, in any threesome, honestly, doggy style becomes very popular very quickly, or, some kind of guy from behind situation. Maybe you're, kind of spooning on your side on the bed or something, and then the other woman's in front of the other woman. I mean, it can go down that way too. But anyway, how to kind of initiate one. So this gets into an interesting subject of like, what is seduction, right? There is, there's forcing yourself upon somebody, and then there is some degree of seduction. I don't think inherently seduction is a bad thing. If you do it right. The way to think about it is this, is that, there's consent and not consent. And then there's I'm trying to think of the best way to describe this. Seduction is asking, the best way to think of seduction is, it is asking the other person the question, could you be interested in this? Could you? It's creating the possibility, and you got to be super careful with that. Okay. Because you want to make sure you have consent all the way across the board, but you need to think of seduction in that way. And whenever somebody doesn't seem to be interested in it, I mean, you can try to be persuasive or whatever, don't be creepy, and that's fine. But that's the way to think of seduction is really just the question, could you be into this? So I'm not necessarily saying you need to seduce per se. I mean, I think the best way that these things kind of happen naturally is just that, you have friends, and at some point, and if you're the kind of person that's already very kind of sexually open anyway, maybe it just happens at some point that the friends kind of get together. I mean, there's people that talk about, okay, so if you're throwing a party and if you want everybody to get into an orgy, just like halfway through the party, start playing porn on the TV set or something. And I've seen this kind of shit work. Okay. But I don't think it's okay, because the ingredient that they're not telling you about is usually everybody's trashed, and drunk. And I'm just not really interested in that at all. I'm a teetotaler all the way. So, to do it without getting all of that stuff involved, it really just kind of has to happen naturally. I mean, you can ask, but you ask in the same way. I mean, you want it to be a friend first, I think. I don't think you just want to be necessarily grabbing somebody off the streets. I mean, there's nothing wrong if you want to pay for somebody to be involved. That's not a bad idea at all. Okay. And I have no qualms about sex work or anything like that. Maybe that's the best way to go about it, so you get a feel for what it's like at first. But I'm not one for drinking. Usually that's the go-to model for people, is that they just get somebody drunk, and then eventually, and some people include that in seduction. I don't consider drinking as in dropping people's inhibitions, through a chemical reaction in their brain. I don't consider that to be asking the question, could you be interested in this? I mean, that it just doesn't feel right to me. I understand why people do it. I'm not knocking people for drinking. I'm just saying that when alcohol gets involved, consent becomes a very sketchy thing. I mean, it just gets very weird regrets can come into play and all that. I'd much rather everybody be totally on board, loving it, enjoying it, wanting it, blah, blah, blah. And often enough, I mean, the easiest ways that the simplest ways that I've ended up involved in threesomes is generally because a girlfriend of mine would have a friend, and it'd end up going like that. Or because, my girlfriend would want to, actually get with my friend, say like a guy friend of mine, not a boyfriend. God, that's not my style. That's fine. If it's anybody else's, go for it, please. But that's how that happens. Anyway, I could go on and on and on about that, but just build up friendships. And, if those friendships go a little further, rock and roll, or go ahead, get a prostitute. That's fine. Get a sex worker. All right. That's the operative term, the preferred term. Get a sex worker, and rock and roll. Okay. But that's how I see it. The way to get into a threesome and all this, I see it as the same way to get into a relationship. You just meet people doing what you already do. Okay. Or, that become a part of your life through actions that you've already been taking for years or things like this. Yeah. I mean, you don't just like when you're at not to say this hasn't happened, but like if you're at a restaurant, you don't just say to the waitress, if you're there if you're a guy and you're there with your girlfriend or whatever, and you say to her, hey, you want to, what are you doing tonight? You want to come back later? Now, I'm not saying that doesn't work and that doesn't happen, but usually you would get some kind of signal for if that was going to be going down. Like the waitress would show some very, very clear signs, that she like really thought that the two of you were cute or something. In cities, that sort of thing, it does happen here and there. But my best thing my best advice is just everybody be friends. That way is something else. Because the other nice thing about that is if something really does go wrong, you can talk about it. You have a foundation that existed beforehand, that you can heal from or restore from, with whatever's going on. So just be super mature about it. Be super patient about it. Okay. Like be super, super patient. Do not be possessive. All right. Really don't be possessive. I know that's kind of tough because you're expressing love in a very real way, perhaps. And maybe you're in a triad relationship where you're expressing that love and all that stuff. Well, then, that's being in a triad relationship is something else, but otherwise, you don't have to be possessive to just, enjoy pleasing other people. Because you can get pleasure from that yourself. That's the very nature of love, at the baseline, I think. Is your pleasure being intertwined with someone else's. So anyway, okay, enough of that. I really need to move on to, let's see, I'll make this kind of the last question, sort of a double header. And if you have more specific stuff to ask on the whole sexual thing, you could always email into Sex and Science Hour. I was honored that they wanted to get my take and they asked me on here. But feel free to email show@sexandsciencehour.com. We have season 3 starting, was it October 21st, I think is when season 3 starts. And so if you have questions like that, bring them on. But I will tell you, I'm going to end it off with this, that I think as a guy, if you're in a heterosexual relationship like the emailer was, and you wanted to add in a third person, generally adding in another woman is going to, in my opinion, give you a lot less drama. And also it kind of makes it a better experience because as long as you can sit back, here and there, women deliver a love to each other that men just cannot replicate. Stop. You can't. Trust me. You fucking can't. I've seen it. Okay. I've been in the room. I cannot deliver what women deliver to each other. That's just not possible. So it allows for a really great dynamic as well when you have a threesome, because you get to explore kind of all the different aspects of human sexuality, which is really, really exciting. Again, you want to be really conscious of everybody involved and, try to make sure everybody's staying involved and intimate and all that. Okay. You don't want anybody getting bored, which happens. But yeah, anyway, okay. So enough of the threesome question. There you go. I hope you enjoyed that. Here is, okay. So I'm not sure where I said this, if I said this in a Patreon episode or if I said this in a Sovereign Tech Proper episode, but the question was, LOL, why do you think Nirvana ruined rock music? You don't like punk music or industrial rock? No love for the music label Sub Pop Records, the label that brought us Nirvana and all the other great grunge gods. Okay, so there's 3 questions there, and I'm going to get on the first one or no, I'm going to get on the second one, and then I'll get into the other two. So the second question was, you don't like punk music or industrial rock? No, I love, there's lots of punk music I really enjoy. There's lots of industrial I really enjoy. I mean, not just Rammstein either when it comes to industrial, or not just Rob Zombie or something like that. I mean, I could go down, kind of go down the list. I mean, like, I'm a huge Ministry fan, love Ministry. And as far as alternative music, yeah, there's lots of alternative music that I really like. And so let me get into the third question. Then I'll talk in a much deeper aspect about, why do I think Nirvana ruined rock music? Because it's a subject I love to talk about. So with kind of the idea of like Sub Pop records that, brought on the grunge gods and all this different stuff, it's like, well, yeah, I mean, it's a question whether or not grunge is like even that great of a music style. It's so depressing. I'll touch on more of that in a minute, but like, there's lots of acts, very alternative acts, kind of punk or industrial acts, or, like new styles of rock music that were coming out of the 80s that didn't require Nirvana to be a big deal. You think Faith No More. I'm a huge Faith No More fan. Or even, Mr. Bungle, which is, of course, from the front man of Faith No More. Love Mr. Bungle, Peeping Tom. I mean, anything that Mike does there, I just think is fantastic. Okay. Ministry, huge fan of. Like, there's tons of bands out there that just didn't need Nirvana at all to be a big deal. In fact, they came before Nirvana, were already changing the music scene, and in many ways didn't get latched onto for whatever reason, and somehow Nirvana, took the whole cake. Okay, so, Sub Pop records, yeah, I mean, Sub Pop, what did they start? Like in the 80s, late 80s, I think Sub Pop records started, signed on a whole bunch of people, Soundgarden and all that, which I dig Soundgarden, I like Chris Cornell and all that, but obviously you look at Chris Cornell's work, the guy was a talent, grunge or not. A tremendous talent at that. I mean, his solo work's fucking phenomenal. But anyway, so let me get on to, so, I'm just saying that I'm totally on board with, with industrial and a lot of these different alternative kinds of music, even some degree of what's called grunge. The problem is in many ways kind of Nirvana itself. And really it is kind of grunge itself. Like I said, I think Soundgarden could have existed on its own. Or like, some people bring up, what about Stone Temple Pilots? Well, Stone Temple Pilots, like they never had an album that sounded the same. So, you can't really classify them anyway. And I mean, I like a lot of Scott Weiland's work. I love what he did with Velvet Revolver. His last album that he worked on, Art of Anarchy, which was the band was Art of Anarchy, and there was a self-titled album. I think that came out in like 2012 or something like that, maybe a little later. Just a badass rock record. I mean, fucking great. So I don't hate all that, but let me explain my problem with Nirvana. Maybe this will shed light on the whole thing. So, the year's 1993, and metal and rock or hard rock, I mean, it gets crazy when you try to define all those terms, had gotten to this incredible point of precision. Okay, to where, like, I mean, you had, some people say it got formulaic because every song had a guitar solo and all this stuff. Well, so what? And like, well, really, how many notes can Yngwie play? I mean, come on, isn't this getting ridiculous? Not really. I mean, seriously, you're insulting people for being that talented? Because that's really what you're doing when you complain about that. You could say it got kind of formulaic. I don't think so. I mean, grunge got fucking formulaic. Are you kidding me? Like, you want to talk about something that turned into a formula? I mean, here's the formula. Shoot myself, burn, 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 shoot myself. Oh, she left me. Oh, the life sucks, blah, blah. I mean, like, it's so fucking depressing. Okay, and that seemed to be the formula. And, that formula morphed, instead of from depressing music, it eventually turned into some kind of, very angry music and all that. Not to say I have a problem with, angry music. I mean, you think something like Suicide Silence, of course, their lead singer died, guys like that, or even Drowning Pool. I mean, some of that stuff, well, now that gets into butt rock and all this. Anyway, I'm going way off on a tangent here. And I don't want this to go over an hour. My point, Nirvana, like, you had, like, music was a real celebration. When you look at music pre-93, say like 81 to 93, or maybe you could even go 79 to, or maybe even older, like, when Kiss started and, when Van Halen started and all this in Purple, Deep Purple and all that. Like, the music was really about having a good time. Like, it was a real celebration in all this. And honestly, if you looked around, I mean, the economy wasn't lying to you. Like, things were pretty good. I mean, this is the era that all the malls came out of, you know what I mean? Because, all this crazy, wild opulence, because the money was there and the people were buying. The people had the cash to do it. Yeah, I mean, just wild. I mean, talk about a time of innovation. Holy fucking shit. And then Nirvana comes out in 93. And it actually, I mean, Nirvana, like, even unseated Michael Jackson's Dangerous album, which is arguably his best album. And took all the thunder away from that. I mean, and that was a great album. If you never listen to Michael Jackson's Dangerous, it is track for track. Even the cheesy shit's good. I mean, Remember the Time, Who Is It, Give In to Me, it had fucking Slash playing on it. Are you kidding me? But Nirvana, kind of toppled that. And I don't get it. Like, I mean, one could argue, if people want to get into like psychologizing it, is that the parents in the 80s were having such a good fucking times, be it, whatever, hitting coke or, having orgies, whatever the case may be. Okay. That maybe they weren't paying enough attention to the kids. And so you had a generation of kids grow up depressed. And when they started hearing Nirvana, they could understand it. And they're like, oh, life is terrible. This all sucks, blah, blah, blah. Yet, I mean, maybe that's what happened, and I know I'm going to get shit for this because I don't get it. I don't understand why anarchists just have like this boner for Nirvana. And they say it's like, well, because he was revealing the truth about the system and all of this stuff. And it's like, well, really? Nirvana's your source for the truth about the system? That's a pretty pathetic source. I'm glad he sings about it sometimes, but and what does Nirvana have anything to say about necessarily like personal freedom or, I mean, personal freedom is about being happy in life, having a good time. Boy, I wouldn't listen to Nirvana to be happy for the life of me. So that's the thing with Nirvana. It's just like, I feel like, I mean, and it's funny. I don't have any proof for this. This is speculation. It's ironic how when grunge becomes a thing, suddenly the economy tanks like no tomorrow. And in many ways, innovation dies. I mean, like everything just kind of goes bad. Once you get into the late 90s, after grunge kind of, leaves the music scene a wasteland, which seemed to be by design. Yeah, I don't get it. I don't understand the appeal. I mean, myself, yeah, I get it. You want stuff that's authentic and honest, myself. And I know this is all personal taste, just like everything I just said about Nirvana is largely personal taste. Some of it is fact. But if music isn't about like sex or, some kind of like, fist raising, like, fuck yeah. All right. I mean, if it's not something, I don't want to say edifying, that sounds too Christian, but if it's not something that's, that's really like, I hate to even say spirit lifting, but just something that gives you a good rise. I mean, I can dig a sad song because I mean, there's times for feeling sad, but like, let's keep it away from, talking about suicide or, how your life is over and all this shit, I mean, I'm totally into a good ballad, please. So my music, the music I like to listen to, I want it to be about the good life. I want it to be about having a good time. I want it to have intensity, not just like depression, but intensity, have it be about sex. I mean, if a song's about sex, rock and roll, baby, I'm on. I mean, why do you think, honestly, and I'm a fan of some rap myself. Why do you think rap took over? Why do you think rap became like the music du jour or the de facto music? Because on the fucking music videos, it was showing money going all over the place, lots of bling, right? Women everywhere and all this stuff, having a good time. That's why it took over. Because metal and rock and everything else stopped showing that shit. And so, people, once they grew up and, maybe they started finding some personal success or something, they looked at, oh, what shows off the kind of life I want to live? Well, there you go. So, I mean, and yeah, I know, you can get into gangster rap where it's about the, hard life in Harlem and all this, or, not in Harlem or whatever, and I get it. Okay. I listen to Ice Cube. I understand. I'm just saying that yeah, I mean, what do you expect? So that's why I say Nirvana ruined music, because it's like, we had this incredible precision A good time was constantly being shown on TV. Wild times were being shown. Life was, good and all stuff. Yeah, there were still governments, unfortunately, but it was just a wild time. Everybody, was being, properly hedonistic and everything. It was just great. And then Nirvana comes and everybody starts, wearing fucking flannel and walking around like life is fuck this shit, fuck it, and it's like, come on, man, pick it up. Life's a good thing. Life's amazing. It really is. Especially when there's love in the world. And I don't ever remember Nirvana much singing about enjoying love. Not really. So maybe I have a superficial outlook on Nirvana. I'm sure some people will give me shit about that. But once they came out, like the music scene it just fucking tanked. Like all the music videos started sucking ass. Everything just started sucking. Everything was just, anger, fuck this, fuck that, blah, blah, blah. There was no good time, no celebration being had anymore through music. And, well, maybe there's something more to that that could be discussed another time. Anyway, enough of that. We're going on the 1 hour mark. I got to get going. So, Carpe Lucem, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please feel free to comment on it or ask me further questions, and I'll get to them next week. And I've got some other great stuff coming out this week as well. So, I'll see you on the other side.
You just experienced Sovereign Tech. Go to sovereigntech.com, that's SOVRYN tech.com, and connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovereign Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.